Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start off on our afternoon program. Um, our first speaker, and by the way, I hope everybody had a good lunch. Our first speaker this afternoon is Dr. Navid Taghvaei. Is a senior clinical education specialist with Signia. He's responsible for conducting complex individual and group technical training courses and activities involving new and existing developments in the areas of audiology products, software, and technology. He demonstrates multi-system products by preparing and conducting clinician training, supports clinical product offerings, and performs in-house clinical trials. For the audiology department team, he has extensive clinical experience in pediatric and adult hearing aid fitting, adult hearing instrument, and cochlear implant fitting, programming, and rehabilitation. He's served as a practicing clinical director of audiology in multiple multidisciplinary otolaryngology and audiology clinics in the U.S. and internationally. Uh, he is he received his doctorate in audiology and master's degree in hearing science from the University of Louisville School of Medicine and his bachelor's degree in cognitive psychology from Arizona State University. He's also served as a lecturer and clinical preceptor at both universities for audiology and psychology courses. Today, he's going to be speaking to us about combining signal processing strategy with user profiles to enhance hearing aid performance. Doctor, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction and hello, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. Really a pleasure to be with you and present on this topic. And I also want to thank the organizers, Seminars in Hearing, everyone that gave me the opportunity to be with you today. Really appreciate that. And it's an honor. Um, Let's go ahead and get started right away. I have some really exciting stuff to talk about in terms of how we're looking at signal processing at WSA. I think we can all agree that ultimate success is making people hear again what's most important to them without many rejections or return visits and complaints that patients would have. It's about securing life that is heard, conversations that they're joining. It's about those words that they're wanting to understand, the music that they enjoy, and really the environments that are recognized. So in today's presentation, we're going to talk about how preferences and sound preferences in particular may provide us some new insights to match technology to patient needs. My name is Navid Taghvaei. I'm a lead clinical education specialist for WSA. I just wanted to disclose that I'm an employee of WSA and do get compensated from that company. I also wanted to thank my colleague, Dr. Dana Helmings, who wrote part of this presentation, half of the presentation, and unfortunately couldn't join us today, but really, again, my pleasure to be here with you. So, one of the things that the questions that we're asking all the time is what are people with hearing loss looking for in hearing aids? You know, the answer can be extremely varied in terms of person to person. Most people, I would say, with hearing loss, look for hearing aids that are not just able to improve their lifestyle, their preferences, their budget is also important, right? So what are people with hearing loss really looking for in hearing aids? The question is central because it really reminds us that hearing aid technology has to solve human problems, not just engineering problems. Um, the number one priority is better speech understanding, yes, especially in challenging settings, noisy restaurants, busy streets, these adverse listening environments, family gatherings. Amplification alone isn't enough. As you know, users want clarity, separation of speech from background noise, less effort in listening. So they also value a natural listening experience. If the sound feels artificially tinny, if they're overwhelmed by it, it becomes fatiguing, frustrating, um, and comfort, both physical and auditory. These are all crucial. So, beyond sound, aesthetics, of course, usability matters. People want devices that are discreet, easy to manage, adaptable without, constant fiddling. And maybe more important, they want hearing aids that help them reconnect socially, right? Rebuild confidence, reduce the isolation that they may be feeling because of the communication difficulties that often kind of accompanies hearing loss, right? So when we design strategies, we need to anchor them in these expectations. This framing helps us then to, if you will, see why personalization and user profiles are so essential in, they're the bridge between the technical capability and real world benefit, if you will. Now, market track data over the years has shown that sound quality, particularly as it relates to speech understanding, especially speech understanding in noise, consistently holds the top spot when it comes to priorities among hearing aid wearers. This really reinforces the idea that um, you know, amplification by itself is not enough. People want clarity, not just loudness. They want to be able to follow conversations, when there is in this real world, in the dynamic environments that we have, where background noise can be overwhelming. But the priorities, don't just stop there. The consistent themes are also that are emerging from the data. Comfort, appearance matters. If a device is physically uncomfortable, if it's cosmetically unappealing, it's a far less likely device to be worn consistently. Battery life, of course, another major consideration. Long-lasting, reliable performance. Connectivity is increasingly becoming important. Today's patients, they're expecting seamless integration with smartphones, televisions, other devices, not just for the convenience, but also because, it allows them to feel more socially connected, technologically up to date. So when we put all of this together, we see kind of a hierarchy of needs. Clear speech and noise at the top, supported then by comfort, usability, um, modern features. This hierarchy is kind of a reminder that advancing signal processing alone won't necessarily solve everything. We have to think holistically about our patient's experience. Now, broadly speaking, I would say all are looking for some combination of these two components. So first, the ability to understand conversations across, if you will, a wide variety um, of listening situations. And if that's a quiet room, if it's a kind of a bustling cafe, if it's a, kind of a large family gathering, party, this ability is really fundamental because communication is at the very heart of our connection, our of human connection. So when speech is difficult to follow, then you have frustration that builds quickly. Um, it's often, it leads to withdrawal, anger sometimes, with social activities, conversation. Understanding is not just about hearing, it's really about participation, inclusion, maintaining relationships. So the second component, of course, is the ability to enjoy the broader sounds of life, includes the richness of music, the subtleties of nature, um, the small environmental cues that make the auditory world kind of feel full and natural. For a lot of people, these sounds contribute to the quality of life, right? The emotional well-being. So um, they give hearing aids a role kind of beyond function. They restore pleasure, spontaneity on everyday kind of experiences. Now, of course, different individuals weigh these components differently. That's true. Some may prioritize the, clear speech understanding above all else. Others place strong value on sound quality for music example or natural environment listening. So what really matters is the almost every that every user is seeking some balance between these two items, right? So this balance is kind of what guides not just the signal processing strategies, but also how we think about personalization through user profiles. Ultimately, our challenges to meet these dual needs in a way that adapt seamlessly to that individual, that patient's lifestyle. Um, Now, in the digital era, um, manufacturers, to stay relevant and maintain kind of market share, uh, they have to, at a minimum, stay on par with all of these four areas that you see here. That means, strong performance in artificial intelligence features on the platform, um, in hardware and processing power, wireless connectivity, um, in the core elements of speech clarity, sound quality. These have become essentially the baseline expectations. No manufacturer can afford to kind of lag behind here. These are really at the start. Where we start to see real differentiation is how each company kind of approaches signal processing. So sound quality, um, this is where their individual philosophies, if you will, come together. Some emphasize very aggressive noise reduction. They prioritize comfort and reduce listening effort. Others are focusing more on preserving the richness, the detail of the input signal that's coming in, even if that means tolerating a bit more background noise. They're willing to do that. So, you know, those choices about filter bank design, compression strategies, directional schemes, things like noise reduction algorithms. These are all reflect the underlying values that they're partaking in the sound philosophy and the signal processing that they're partaking in. So then the result is that each manufacturer has a slightly different sound design, almost like a signature, if you will, or a house style. Um, for us, for clinicians, I think it can mean that patients sometimes develop strong preferences for one brand over another, not just because of those features, but because of how the device actually sounds in their everyday life, right? So for researchers, it shows us that there is no single best solution. There are multiple valid approaches, each of these with trade-offs. So at the same time, while manufacturers, have to keep pace with pace of this foundational elements, the arena of signal processing is where, if you will, innovation, competition, and these philosophical differences continue to shape the field most strongly. So, um, so that's really the point there is that, when we look at hearing care, the hearing care journey, um, starting the starting point where the hearing care professionals interaction, the pre-fitting stage, diagnostics, the assessment, these are kind of the foundation of everything that follows, of course. We're not just identifying audiometric thresholds, we're really considering lifestyle communication goals, patient expectations. Early market track data has shown actually that satisfaction and long-term outcomes are really tightly connected, whether those initial needs are recognized and addressed right from the beginning or not. So from there, then of course we move into first fit, initial intervention. That first experience can be really pivotal, I would say. I think we all agree that it really kind of shapes that first impression, shapes the patient's reaction to amplification. It can actually very strongly influence whether or not they continue to use the device or devices. So first impression is, it's got to be positive. If it's positive, then it sets the stage for things like acclimatization and learning. If it's negative, then you have resistance, device rejection, even abandonment of the whole thing. So we also need to think about processes of acclimatization, like cognitive adaptation, neuroplasticity. Over time, our patients don't just, adjust to, the new auditory input. They actually develop new perceptual strategies. So, to engage in perceptual learning, this is why sustained benefit often kind of depends on as much on the neural health and adaptation capability as it does with the technology itself, right? So it's not just about the um, digital signal processing. So when we map this journey from diagnostics to needs assessment, to first fit to acclimatization, long-term outcomes, it becomes really clear that at every stage, not only that it matters, but that really a strong pre-fitting foundation doesn't just guide the technology selection, it also builds trust, helps the patient engage fully in the process of auditory rehabilitation. So this is all part of the journey. Now, as a profession, we excel in assessing patient needs. This is truly one of the core strengths, I believe, that we have on one-on-one basis. Audiometrically, we of course quantify thresholds. Objectively, we measure, capture speech and noise performance, functional communication abilities. We combine these to, if you will, with history, patient interviews from to form a comprehensive picture essentially. But the assessment, go well beyond the audiogram. We routinely look at the impact of hearing loss on daily life using tools like self-reports, scales. Um, I'm not going to go into all of these, of course, but um, does this patient spend their days in quiet one-on-one conversations, or are they regularly navigating kind of meetings and social events and noisy public spaces? So we got to consider prior hearing aid experience. A lot of the past successes, frustrations shape those expectations that the patient brings to us, and of course, we also today account for related connectivity. Now accessories, smartphones, apps, these are becoming it's a very important part of the hearing experience. Many of us didn't think we would be also doing wireless and Bluetooth technical work, but what we are as audiologists, right? So. Probably most importantly, we are really skilled at collaborating with patients to prioritize these needs. It's not about checking off every feature, right? It's about aligning those solutions with what matters most to that particular patient, to that individual. So for one patient, speech clarity and noise may be paramount. For another patient, it's like seamless streaming and discrete design that takes kind of the center stage for them. So our role is really to interpret the data, balance these competing demands, and translate them into strong evidence-based recommendations. So this ability to bridge objective measures with subjective needs is one of the greatest values I think as audiologists we bring to the hearing care professional, and it really forms the foundation of the success and the outcomes that the patient have. Now, yet, despite all of the careful assessment, the technology available, returns and relapse, where patient stops using their devices. So these actually remain persistent, challenging situations for us in the hearing aid, in the hearing care journey. So in fact, um, in some dispensing settings, the average conversion rate is only about 50%. So that means half of the people who could be benefiting from hearing aids never actually make it through the through that uh, consistent use. So we've kind of all seen these cases where in practice, for example, the patient who at least on paper should be doing much better than they are. The audiogram looks straightforward. You have fitting targets that are met. The devices are functioning properly, yet the patient satisfaction isn't there. They may even stop wearing them, right? Then we look at reasons most often cited, and then you see patterns, of course. So what are those patterns? Well, difficulty hearing in noise. That's still on the top of the list. But also they mentioned things like sound artifact, lack of naturalness, poor clarity. In fact, um, most switches between brands and many of the returns we see can be traced back to the dissatisfaction with the actual sound experience. This tells us two kind of important things. First, that technical measures we use, that to define a very successful fitting don't always capture the nuances that use to define a successful fitting. So they don't always capture those real world listening kind of experiences. Secondly, it also highlights a huge opportunity for the field, for manufacturers as well. We can better understand, address these factors to drive satisfaction, especially those tied to sound quality. We can reduce returns, improve adoption rates, and we can deliver outcomes that align more closely with patient expectations. That should be the goal. So critical question would be then, what might we be missing, and how can we, as an industry, continue to refine both our technology and our clinical approaches to close that gap, right? Well, as I mentioned, sound experiences is probably one of those things that has fallen kind of forgotten about. So, what if there is that critical component to success along the patient journey we discussed? Um, that industry has simply not been really giving enough thought, right? Attention. We spent decades refining diagnostics. We were perfecting fitting formulas, um, advancing signal processing technologies. But what if, despite all of this, all the processes, all the progress, there's still a missing puzzle piece? So I want to suggest that sound preference may be that missing piece. Um, if you think about it, two patients, identical audiograms, fit with the same device, both meeting prescriptive targets, may walk away with the fitting from completely different levels of satisfaction. I think we've all seen this in the clinic. One is thrilled, they're like the sound quality. The other one is finding that experience artificial. Sometimes they're like, oh, it's unnatural, it's hissy, it's harsh. So, the difference here isn't just necessarily measurable in dBs or the SNR. It's really about that personal preference, about the subjective qualities of that sound that they're hearing, that resonates with that particular individual, with that particular patient. So historically, as a industry, we've tended to kind of treat sound preferences as a secondary, or even kind of like, well, that's a bonus, right? So something to address only after kind of all the technical stuff has been done and all the boxes are checked. So maybe it deserves to actually be more central because of the preferences that kind of strongly shape our and whether the device is accepted, worn, whether it's appreciated. Kind of overlooking it may actually mean that we're missing that factor that truly drives long-term satisfaction. So the question becomes, how do we evaluate sound preference from a peripheral consideration to kind of a systematic part of our approach? How do we build into our models, our fitting, and even the technical innovations that we have? So this may be this next frontier for improving the outcomes, the bridging that gap between the technology delivering what our patients actually want. Well, um, personal preferences everywhere, of course. We all have preferences. Some of us love to kind of roar of if you're a car person, love the roar of a V8 engine. Others find joy in the rumble of a classic car. We're all different, right? So uh, some people will always kind of reach for a Snickers bar, if you will, or some for Twix. It's just how others feel differently. And so, of course, whether you prefer red wine or white wine, it says something as much about your personality as it does about your palate. So I don't want to start brawl online here, but one of the most visible examples of um, the preferences is Android versus Apple, right? The whole debate, objectively, both perform platforms, Android and iOS, highly capable devices. They each check the boxes for performance, the features, the connectivity. But when you get down to it, a lot of people choose based on feel, based on style, the subjective experience of use. So what's important here is that preference is not trivial. Um, it drives decision making in nearly every domain of our lives, from what we kind of eat to where we go, what we wear, the technology we surround ourselves with. Preferences are shaped by personal history, our cultural influences, our expectations, sometimes even mood or context. They're powerful enough to really kind of determine the satisfaction, the loyalty, and that long-term adoption. So if preferences are this pervasive, right, in daily life, it should not surprise many of us that they play kind of a major role in hearing aid use as well. Even when the objective measures are identical, um, two devices offering the same technical performance, right? Patients are going to still express strong preferences for one sound over another. Um, and the recognition is what actually positions sound preference as more than just an issue. It's more of a central part of how people experience hearing aids. It's a central part of ultimately whether they embrace them or not. So, of course, with our senses, we all have ways that we like to experience the world. We like to think about how we engage with sound. Some people like to crank up the bass. Others are, prefer a balanced kind of an enhanced reproduction. So it's the same visual perception, if you will. For visual perception, some may prefer vivid, high contrast photography. Um, Others enjoy softer, more natural tones. So these preferences, they can be really deeply personal. They may even be kind of ingrained in us, as I mentioned. Some people um, lean more mathematical or analytical. Others are more artistic, more creative. So here's the pivot. So what if we take this same way of thinking and apply it to hearing aids? If we, instead of assuming that one prescribed setting or one target curve is right for everyone, we gave ourselves more of a, if you will, privilege of preference, right? So imagine the difference that could make instead of kind of struggling to adapt to a sound that feels unnatural, or maybe users could experience amplification that matches their own personal taste. Instead of getting fatigued, maybe they could use something that actually revives them through the day and keeps them engaged. They could make adoption smoother, satisfaction is going to be higher. That journey towards better hearing, it's not just a clinical process, but also a personal choice. So maybe the key question would be, what if that missing ingredient isn't more complex algorithms or more channels, but simply kind of the opportunity to say, this sounds better for me. This is right for me. Um, and I'll let you kind of think about that for just a little bit, because it really may be a turning point in how we think about hearing aid fittings and satisfaction from hearing instruments. Now, of course, sound preferences refer to the individual's inclination toward those specific auditory stimuli, and it's really shaped by a complex interplay of biology, psychology, environmental factors. The preferences influence how people perceive, respond to sound. Their daily lives ranges from music to ambient noise. The formation of sound preferences begins really early in life, actually. It's influenced by exposure, cultural norms, personal experiences. If a person is raised in a musical household, they're going to develop very likely more preferences for certain kinds of genres of instruments or music. Um, and sound preferences actually aren't static either, so they actually evolve over time based on changes in hearing ability, emotional associations, lifestyle. So understanding these preferences is really crucial to design auditory technologies and environments that then align with user expectations and enhancing satisfaction and comfort for them. In hearing healthcare, patient profiling is done a lot of times with identifying these subgroups of hearing impaired individuals with distinct perceptual deficits. So auditory profiling, data-driven approach to um, analyzing these various aspects of auditory perception, classifying them into clinically relevant subpopulations, and then it enables then tailoring hearing aid fittings and the rehabilitation that needs to go on for those strategies to address specific needs. For example, uh, profiling and differentiating between patients with a simple, similar audiograms, same exact thing, but varying difficulties in noisy environments, guiding more effective interventions, better communication strategies, predictive models that can also play a role in hearing healthcare by looking at factors like personality traits, attitudes towards hearing aids, uh, perceived consequences of hearing loss. These models actually help anticipate help-seeking behavior, and they customize communication strategies. We actually for multiple brands under WSA have from time to time brought about hearing profiles to look at these kinds of preferences and auditory memory. So integrating behavioral psychographic data, then we can, as audiologists, design individuals the care that they need based on their own considerations, their own lifestyle, their own emotional readiness. Overall, profiling in audiology really enhances the precision of the treatment that we're going to give the patient in the clinic, improves their satisfaction, supports proactive hearing rehabilitation. Um, it also presents some pitfalls. In hearing healthcare, specifically patient profiling, common issue is the over reliance on audiometric data, such as specifically just pure tone thresholds, for example, um, which may not necessarily capture the perceptual deficits that are experienced by the patient. Um, this kind of narrow focus can lead to uh, rehabilitation strategies that fail to address real world challenges that the patient has. And the adoption of complementary measures like speech and noise tests then faces barriers in clinical implementation and limiting the scope of the profiling that we do. So also, use of additional auditory information is not always clearly linked to specific rehab innovations, reducing its practical utility. Another concern is the neglect of patient-centered factors. For example, emotional readiness, family dynamics, psychosocial context. These are crucial for successful hearing care. This is why we spend so much time with our patients. I heard in one of the talks, more than any other healthcare provider, um, probably other than psychologists. We spend a lot of time with our patients simply because of these factors. And we have to balance those, again, objective data with the subjective experiences to provide more of a holistic care. Without the balance, profiling may actually lead to interventions that are technically sound, but they're misaligned with the patient's expectations or their preferences. So addressing those pitfalls requires kind of a shift towards more inclusive, flexible profiling methods that prioritize the individual's lived experience. Um, Sound preferences are highly individualized. They play a crucial role in hearing healthcare. Customization enhances a lot of comfort and speech clarity. We work very closely with patients to create personalized sound profiles, empowering users to kind of control their auditory experience, fostering a sense of autonomy rather than, with individuals with unique hearing challenges rather than kind of a cookie cutter approach, if you will. Um, Preferences are choices, they're inclinations that are shaped by a lot of factors, a wide variety of individual experiences. Our biology, psychology, neurology, as well as influences, individual experiences, and cultural influences, um, environmental factors, the lived experiences that we have. So preferences is not random. It's a product of multiple layers of who we are, and they strongly influence behavior, decision making, and even acceptance of new technology or medical treatments like hearing aids. So if you think about patients that respond to changes in their routine or to new devices, sometimes even the technology is demonstrably better. Individuals resist because it doesn't align with their established preferences. We've seen this over and over again with things like form factors. This is one of the things that WSA, I feel like, does really well with having a gazillion form factors out there because we know that individual preference really matters for the patient and for the success of the patient. Um, okay, so um, I think we inherently know as this as professionals are actually the insights that we have. The research confirms that what we also, a lot of us already kind of see in practice. No single hearing aid technology is best for all wearers. In fact, 85% of hearing care professionals agree with this statement. And when you think about it, how could it be any different? I mean, every patient with a unique combination of hearing thresholds, communication goals, lifestyle demands, expectations. Um, as hearing care professionals, we do our best to match these features to form factors and to brand technologies to meet those needs. Some patients prioritize discretion, some are about comfort, style. Um, s- Others want latest connectivity features. So here's the important question. From the patient's perspective, do we really know what drives their preferences? Do we often assume, uh, because we do think like, the charger design or the physical appearance or the overall comfort of the device or some, and sometimes it is those things. But what if there's more going beneath the hood there, more going on in terms of subjective perceptions of how the device makes the world feel when listening through the hearing aids? Um, so what do I mean by that? What if, in fact, there was a truth about preferences that we need to redefine so that for some people, one distinct sound design is much more natural, maybe preferred than any other, vice versa. It's our opportunity to kind of dig a little deeper into those unknowns that would be impacting the patient along the line down the road, their experience, and even the outcomes that we see from that patient, from that fitting. Now, WSA is actually very interested in this conversation because we occupy somewhat a unique position in the industry. We have two distinct premium brands in Widex Insignia. They're intentionally designed to deliver different sound experiences, different from other companies, I would say, that really consolidate into a single technology, or if you will, a platform. We're deliberately choosing to merge our signal processing. Instead, we maintain two equal and distinct platforms, each with their own R&D team, uh, its own philosophy of sound, and its own way of addressing challenges of hearing aid performance. Since we merged actually in 2019, we've stayed absolutely committed to that path because we believe each brand brings something of real value to our patients. Whitex and Signia represent different approaches, no question about it, to sound design, and we're going to talk about this. In the clinic, a lot of us have seen firsthand how a patient may respond poorly to one brand sound, but really thrive with the other. Those experiences reinforce the idea that this distinct sound philosophies are not redundant, they meet different needs. That said, um, anecdotal reports alone, of course, are not enough. As scientists and clinicians, we need more than just intuition and field observations, right? The science demands that we actually test this empirically. Do distinct platforms actually measure, and they have a meaningful benefit for patients? Um, are they different, and that can be observed quantitatively? Um, are preferences stable across populations, or do they shift from hearing profiles, from age, from lifestyle, as I mentioned? Yes, even our owners and investors want to know more whether maintaining, this two parallel platforms and two R&D teams is the right long-term strategy. So this is where research meets practice, right? By investigating patient preferences and outcomes across our two brands, we can really validate or challenge the assumption that distinct sound designs are not only valuable but essential uh, for our clinics. So we started by assessing some of the core technological differences between our two brands. Um, Well, at the same time, there are many layers that kind of contribute to sound design. Foundation, we can point to fundamental differences in each brand's approach to filter bank design. This is that first step in digital signal processing where the analog signal is converted into a digital form for further processing. So for Whitex, the approach is really rooted in time domain, so time domain processing. And so the philosophy here is that the best hearing experience comes from preserving as much of the full sound scene as possible. That's done with maintaining more temporal precision. Whitex emphasizes a natural, very transparent sound, one that is fine details. Those fine details are kind of retained within the signal rather than processed, and acoustic environment feels authentic. Um, the underlying belief is in that philosophy by presenting the brain with the full spectrum of auditory information, listeners can then make use of their own natural processing ability to focus on what matters. Now, on the other hand, Signia takes a different approach. They have a frequency domain approach. Uh, Here, the philosophy is that the best hearing experience actually comes from enhancing contrast, emphasizing the elements of signal that are most relevant. So, like speech, reducing less relevant, like interfering sounds, background noise. This creates a soundscape that's more selectively shaped. So, with the goal of making the speech pop out, stand out more, be more clear against noise. So the two philosophies represent not just technical differences, but also those very distinct ideas about how people achieve the best hearing outcomes. Um, And do we give the brain the richest possible input and let it sort through the details, or do we give it more refined, contrast, enhanced signal that highlights what matters most, right? Neither approach is inherently better or worse. They're simply reflecting the difference in a different path that we're taking in supporting hearing and the preferences that we've been talking about. So, and this divergence is what really makes WSA unique, in my humble opinion, in continuing to invest into intentionally different sound designs in Widex and Signia, which we'll talk about. So, um, yes, so on this slide, we're going to see how those two philosophies actually translate into distinct experiences. On one side, we have accurate natural sound reproduction. This is the Widex approach, very unique time domain processing with ultra low delay. The goal is to mimic the way that human ear processes the sound in real life. On the other side, we also have enhanced and optimized sound reproduction. So this is the Signia approach that makes superior use of the frequency domain processing with breakthrough technology, really enhancing the contrast between speech and noise. And the goal is to sharpen speech clarity, particularly in those challenging listening environments where the background noise is, it can be overwhelming. So what we really see here is not just two sets of features, but two different philosophies of hearing, and how do we prioritize those? And that's what we're talking about with Widex and Signia. Both approaches are valid. They're both valued by different groups of patients. And this is exactly why WSA continues to really invest into very distinct philosophies and technologies and sound processing. So let's talk about Widex first. This is really the essence of Widex technology. At its core, we preserve full sound scene, clear speech, and rich detail. Long emphasis on clear speech only is only part of the equation. Of course, users need to follow conversation. They also want to experience sound that feels real. Uh, that's why the focus is on delivering sound that is rich, it's detailed, and it's natural. Whether it's the subtle rustle of leaves or the resonance of the musical notes or the hum of the background activity in a cafe. Widex really looks to make sure that those soundscapes are complete and not stripped down, if you will. Um, okay. So you can see that, and this is just showing you the time domain processing, and that's reflected here. So you can see that philosophy reflects kind of in a system where the filters are of varying widths. Uh, so narrower in the low frequencies, wider in the highs. This design is directly aligned with the tonotopic organization of the cochlea, where different regions of the basilar membrane respond to different frequencies. Um, so what that means is we're trying to mimic the way human ear naturally processes the sound. The time domain approach really allows the signal um, follows it as it unfolds in real time instead of kind of breaking the sound apart into fixed artificial blocks, and a system adapts dynamically, makes sure the timing cues are preserved, and the timing, the precision is really critical for pitch perception, spatial awareness, of course, and the brain's ability to separate speech from background noise. Um, so, pitch adaptive filters in real time and mimicking the human here, absolutely not just about filter design, but and engineering choice, but really about aligning technology with human biology and how and leveraging the brain's natural processes and strategies to do so. Um, you can see here that, and this is showing you the measures of signal processing delay. We're talking about, of course, Widex's low delay with Widex that you have at the bottom here. You can see as compared to some competitors there. And so you can see that really unacceptable delays that leads to perceptual issues, to distortion, to echo effects, to hollow, unnatural quality of sound. For patients, this can be immediately fatiguing. They're gonna be like, no thanks. And so it really can be one of the bigger contributors to rejection of the device because it doesn't feel right, doesn't sound right, right? By operating in time domain, we're able to keep delay remarkably low. And we'll talk about this more, but really the advantage here is not just technical, it's perceptual. Low delay supports um, sense of immediacy, the naturalness, the listening experience helps to maintain brain's ability to localize sound sources. So that's why we're going after uh, low delay. And as you can see with the reference that I put here, delay is one of the clearest ways to where the processing choices impact the perceived sound quality. This is a great example of how core design philosophy can be tangible in wearer's everyday experience. And then here, what we're looking at is a couple of important benefits. The first benefit for time domain processing, of course, is that with time domain processing, it stays in sync with the brain's natural neural timing. So our auditory system relies heavily on precise temporal cues, of course, understanding speech timing on the scale of microseconds. By operating in the time domain, we're maintaining ultra low processing delay. Means that amplified signal arrives almost instantaneously, aligning seamlessly with the direct sound entering the ear canal. So the benefit goes more than that, of course. Neural studies have shown where there is delay, when the delay is minimized, the brain actually encodes the speech cues more effectively. For example, our zero delay technology, the envelope following frequency following response demonstrate, and this is what you have here, showing you that Whitex shows a more accurate and stronger envelope following response, indicating better representation of important speech cues in the brain. So by staying in sync with the brain's timing, time domain processing supports both a more natural listening experience and improved speech comprehension in those difficult listening environments in everyday situations. And then longer processing delays, of course, disrupt neural phase locking. So that disruption results in potentially distorted speech signal being delivered to the brain. Neural phase locking refers to the brain's ability to synchronize neural activity. When delay is introduced in the hearing aid, then the brain struggles to maintain this synchronization. So the timing mismatch has measurable consequences. You can see this is one of the peer-reviewed that was published in Ear and Hearing here, and this is from that article. I have the reference here at the bottom. So this is really powerful evidence that links the engineering choice directly to the neurophysiological outcomes. If longer delays distort the brain's ability to synchronize speech, then you have minimizing delay. It's not just a technical achievement, it's a clinical necessity, and it supports both representations of speech cues, and better communication performance in these environments where the patient feels like they're getting an actual benefit and the kind of sound that they expect. The second important benefit of the time domain processing is that it prevents comb filtering. Now, comb filtering occurs when the same sound reaches the ear through two different paths. So direct sound entering the ear canal, amplified sound then processed through the hearing aid. If the amplified signal is delayed, even slightly delayed, those two waveforms therefore are interfering with each other. Whoops, I'm sorry. Let me go back to that. And so by minimizing the processing delay, the time domain is going to keep the amplified signal closely aligned with the direct sound. For patients' perspective, from their perspective, it really retaining the natural depth of the soundscape instead of feeling artificial or sounding metallic or sounds remain full, they remain realistic, spacious. So the benefit isn't only improved sound quality, it's also reduced listening fatigue. When signal feels natural, the brain doesn't have to work as hard to notice the mismatch um, between the inputs. So the first benefit of time domain, of course, is about staying in sync, brain's timing. The second is about preserving the integrity of the richness of the soundscape by preventing comb filtering. Well, if you've heard of these kinds of complaints in your open or vented fittings, then you and your patients have experienced the impact of delay. Words like tinny or hollow or artificial or microphony and stuff like this. Uh, Here's what's happening. When a patient has residual natural hearing, in the low frequencies, as is common many times, for open or a vented fitting, they're receiving both the direct signal and the amplified processed signal. So if those two signals are out of sync, even by a few milliseconds, the interference then creates distortion. Patients don't describe this as in technical terms, of course. They're always like talking about metallic or unnatural or uncomfortable. For a lot of them, these impressions are powerful, as we discussed earlier. We might be able to fit to the audiogram perfectly, optimizing those targets, verification, all the good stuff. But when it comes to validity, um, you know, it's funny, it's boomy, it's hollowy. So we hear these feedbacks. It's not random. It's perceptual, kind of fingerprint of the delay, and it reminds us that why time domain processing is important and why that decision was made. Here we're highlighting some actually compelling data from 2021, Balling and others. This was published in the Hearing Review, focus on the impact of ultra-fast signal processing. So, we're suggesting that the technical choices around the ultra-low processing delay and time domain, the fidelity aren't just engineering distinctions. They're directly shaping everyday experiences of the wearer. So they actually argue that sound quality is not just a luxury or an extra, it's actually central to the hearing aid adoption and long-term use. Another key point is actually in the article that they mention, those groups are actually often most vocal about the subtle differences. The study shows that across the entire population of users, people respond very positively when the sound feels authentic and free from artifacts like delay and things of that nature. So um, more than 3 times, as you can see here, our sound quality with pure sound was preferred over the sound quality of other competitors. Okay, natural clarity is what we deliver so that our wearers, of course, can effortlessly be immersed in their environment. But what I want to provide here is some context about what that means, right? So what does it mean to deliver clarity? What does it mean to be effortlessly immersed in your environment? These words that we're using. Imagine sitting in a busy restaurant, kind of surrounded by friends. Their laughter, voices are weaving together, very lively conversation. You try and follow along, and of course, words blur, fragmented by the clatter of dishes or overlapping chatter, things of that nature. It's like reading a book with pages that are kind of smeared in ink, right? The meaning is there, but just out of reach. It's kind of like speech and noise when we hear that complaint. A joke is missed at the dinner table at a crucial moment. Everybody's laughing, and the patient is not getting it or missed the joke, if you will. Um, and so that's what we're talking about. When clarity is achieved, when technology enables a natural balance between those awareness and understanding, then communication becomes effortless again. It opens up the world to the patient. And clarity is not just about hearing, it's also about belonging, about reclaiming the ease of the joy of being fully immersed in your life in that environment. So that's all delivered in Allure, our latest technology. I have some slides here for you about Allure. Very excited about Allure and this platform. Um, really, these elements of precision hearing technology, and I'll go through them and how they actually work in some evidence to show you about the effectiveness. But remember, there's never just one element or the other. It's really combination of things we do. Um, Interacting with each other, and of course, building on top of the Widex technology that has developed and evolved over generations now. Allure really allows us to take that next level and employ some of the things we've been talking about here today. So one of the first things is managing noise, of course. And I want to talk about our Speech Enhancer Pro. We now analyze with our Speech Enhancer Pro, our latest technology in the Allure hearing instruments. Um, we now analyze the incoming sound in 52 analysis bands at the input stage. So to deliver a very precise representation of what is noise versus what is speech to the hearing aids processor. So more of a granular estimation of noise in 52 bands. At the same time, optimized speech intelligibility index calculation in our 15 channels. So really the best of both worlds. Speech Enhancer Pro takes a different approach to delivering better speech. Um, so noise is softened to fall right below the user's hearing threshold while speech is boosted. This allows words to be heard with amazing clarity. In fact, the results of the innovation, Allure is preferred 92% by the users in noisy situations. And I'll get to that study in just a moment. As you can probably remember, if you're familiar with Widex, we've relied on slow-acting processes to manage noise in the past. This has allowed us to um, keep noise calm, stable, comfortable. With the new Speech Enhancer Pro now in the Allure platform, we're adding a fast-acting signal processor. It's a signal extractor, FASE, we call it, FASE, and it uses a 52 band analysis, as I mentioned, and a 15 channel processing to provide SNR improvements on top of our slow acting SII based noise reduction. So um, some of the elements of the Speech Enhancement Pro, fast-acting signal extraction based on this new 52-channel filtering, really aim to perfect the balancing of the SNR improvement on top of the slow-acting SII-based noise reduction to make sure everything is very stable, consistent enhancement of speech above noise. So slow-acting SII based on speech enhancement in 15 channels and slow-acting HTL optimization of speech for moderate, severe hearing losses. So keeping those background noises constantly reduced, at the same time keeping speech input above the threshold. So when we're thinking about what happens in hearing aids, the moment platform, the microphone picks up, at the moment the microphone is picking up the signal, um, it's helpful to visualize the full signal path. So with Widex um, moment and earlier generations, the process begins at the microphone. So they capture the incoming acoustic signal from the environment, pure analog at this point, and then sent to the analog to digital converter, then transfers that into a digital data. So the key difference between the Widex system is what happens next. So before any major digital signal processing takes place, before any kind of compression or noise reduction or directionality adjustments are done, signal passes through the time domain filter bank. This is where that time domain filter bank, the Widex philosophy, really takes place. Um, so from a design perspective, the structure reflects um, um, a deep commitment to transparency and immediacy by maintaining the integrity of the waveform as early as possible in the process, in the chain, and then minimizing artifact and delivering sound that feels clear and organic, like real life does. Now with Allure, we've taken one major leap forward. What's new here is the addition of a fast-acting input analysis and actually operating across the 52 frequency bands and happens before the signal even reaches the time domain filter bank. So in practical terms, it means that as soon as the microphones capture the sound, immediately performs a fine-grained spectral analysis. It allows it to identify those key components of the input, so speech and noise, almost instantaneously, level granular 52 bands of analysis. The levels of the 52 band analysis gives the processor a very high detailed picture, if you will, of deeper before the deeper processing begins. So once that input analysis is complete, then it's passed to the familiar time domain filter bank, divided into 15 independent channels, using the SII based and hearing threshold level optimization. And so we're combining two powerful stages: rapid, high resolution front end analysis, and then precision naturalness of Widex's time domain strategy. Result is a sound experience that is really unlike any other sound in the hearing aid world. And it offers, very authentic, transparent sound that patients are many times looking for, and sometimes they're not getting because they're not wearing a time domain type of processing. So just remember the fast acting 52 band, and then the full 15 channel SII based hearing threshold is what gives us these two main points on the Allure processing platform. I do want to show you some noise reduction studies that were in the works and are in the works. So these are recordings that were made of target speech at 0 degrees with plus 5 dB SNR in 3 recorded real-world sound senses. So bar, restaurant, train station. These were through the Widex Allure and the Widex Moment SRIC. These were 25 experienced hearing aid users, and they rated the recordings through a set of headphones, Sennheiser headphones, and compared the recordings both with respect to noise annoyance and with respect to general preference. And of course, One Speech Enhancer Pro, once it was developed, we wanted to gather clear evidence on how effectively it actually is working. So in this study, as I mentioned, this was done actually externally, not in our lab at Horizon Trum Oldenburg, paid participants mild to moderate hearing loss. And results are really remarkable, really consistent with what we looked at when we looked at the ratings for noise annoyance. 96% of participants reported less annoyance with Allure compared with Moment, our previous platform. Means that almost every listener found the new noise reduction approach much more pleasant and less intrusive across different listening conditions. Even more compelling, I would say, is 92% of the participants preferred Allure when they're asked which system made it easier to tolerate sound in a noisy environment. That's a strong indication that the new front-end analysis, the Speech Enhancer Pro, isn't just working on paper, it's actually delivering those tangible improvements that we're looking for our patients. So very, very proud of this result. So the benefits of Speech Enhancement Pro, clear for wearers, reduce noise annoyance, preference for this technology and noise that's able to be more accurately estimated, automatically managed. For us as providers, as clinicians, improved experience in noise, improved patient experience in noise, and of course, noise reduction strategy that optimizes SII for that specific patient and specific environment. Both win. So if we go to our dynamic feedback controller, I have a feeling this is actually going to be really exciting for some of you. Maybe some of you have fit Widex in the past and some point struggled at some point to manage feedback in a fitting or get an available gain that you need. So in the old system, there were two parts to our feedback test, the dynamic cancellation optimizer and the feedback path simulator. The cancellation optimizer is fast acting component. The feedback path simulator is a slow component of that system. So this DCO, I'll call it, dynamic cancellation optimizer, looks for audible feedback. Um, and it'll temporarily reduce actually the gain so the patient doesn't get feedback. The frequency path simulator is constantly actually looking for audible and inaudible feedback. This is the phase cancellation part that it does. I'm really excited to talk about the new dynamic feedback controller because it's completely redesigned and something truly unique in WideX. So with WideX Allure, this really represents, I think, a major step forward in how we handle the balance of those, creating a good sound quality, audible speech, but also getting rid of those sudden distracting whistles and all of that. So, what makes the system revolutionary that it doesn't just react, it predicts and prevents feedback before it even begins. So it uses real-time input monitoring. It's constantly analyzing the acoustic conditions, and when it detects a risk, it actually does a quick acoustic calibration um, tailored to that individual's unique ear canal. So it ensures the personalization again for that patient. Um, Very much different from conventional systems that rely on a constant kind of frequency shifting, which can introduce artifacts when you do that, right? So our adaptive frequency shifting is going to activate only when needed and only within a precise frequency band. So that means the signature whitest sound quality is going to be clear, natural, transparent, as and fully preserved. This also gives more flexibility to fit closer to target and maybe even fit more openly if we want to do that. And to explain the feature, I just have this slide for you. You can see that it represents a representation of the risk of the feedback and activation of the adaptive dynamic feedback controller now in the Allure. In mid-range, where there's a risk of feedback and risk of frequency shifting, um, being audible, we apply our adaptive frequency um, um, shifting according to the set of rules that adapt the size 6 to 22 kilohertz, so speed. At starting point, 850 hertz to 2.7 kilohertz of shifting to stop feedback and preserve sound quality. So you can see that size and speed at the starting point really matters with depending on the risk of feedback and the activation of the dynamic feedback controller and in which bands does it actually um, happen. So I wanted to show you a study on our new feedback controller. This is our dynamic feedback controller. There is two parts to this study, both relied on recordings in order to allow direct comparison between the different feedback canceling mechanisms. Part one is to compare between the dynamic feedback controller and the WideX in the Allure platform, and then the feedback manager on the previous WideX moments. And the part two was the Allure platform was compared to the newest premium devices for other major hearing aid manufacturers. So you can see the results here by comparison with Allure. Really, so three dis the three distances that you see here by comparison were significantly preferred in terms of the um, um, significance in the study. The first perspective here illustrates in the left panel shows clear preference for Allure across all three distances. So these are proportional comparisons in favor of Allure versus moments. And three distances from the ear are shown separately in the left panel, and differences between the three distances were tested using a binaural mix model and very significant results here, as you can see. At the 10 millimeter distance, Allure showed that the feedback differences may be smaller because of the feedback system is less active, making preference a little less systematic, but the preference for Allure was significant in all distances from the ear, indicating that the Allure feedback management was preferred across different ways of changing the feedback path, suggesting a very robust effect across the different real life situations. And the second, of course, is the result of you can see on the right side, it splits the participants on whether they preferred Allure or Moment, and majority, of course, preferred Allure, as you can see. So excellent results. Again, here's another study showing you another perspective showing you that significant preferences, not just for Allure, for those three out of the four comparisons hearing aids, because you can see here by participants and by comparison of the preferences for Allure between the different hearing aids. And really, um, as you can see on the right slide, illustrating the analysis by the participants, showing a proportion of participants whose mean preferences across hearing aids are um, in favor of Allure. So this is an 84% preference for Allure over other brands. So again, very encouraging results. I'm very proud of this. Dynamic feedback cancellation, controller, wearers are going to benefit from faster, more efficient management of feedback. And of course, you are going to, as clinicians, benefit from additional available gain, more flexibility in choosing ear tips, and easier successful fittings, of course. Very good. Um, so let me go ahead and shift now to, I just want to show you a quick study on the pure sound for Allure. This is where we use noise and speech babble in a matrix test with cafeteria noise, about 65 dB. And we had a female matrix sense that was adaptive, so unaided practice trial, and then an aided trial. So you can see the two conditions there. And here you can see a mean SRT 80. And why SRT 80? Well, SRT 50, which is what usually is used in these studies, are when the patient can understand half of the words correctly, but in real world, 50% comprehension, of course, is that really the goal? I don't think so. So 80% correct is a much more clinically meaningful benchmark, I would say. In this study, we're showing very encouraging lower on the graph is better, of course. So, and what we found is a 4 dB lower SRT 80 with a lower pure sound compared to the moment pure sound. That's a very substantial difference. It means that on the average, patients needed 4.3 dB less favorable signal to noise ratio to achieve the same level of speech understanding. So 4.3 dB improvement, I would say quite the feat. Okay, well, let's jump into Signia in the remaining time that we have. I also want to talk about Signia and the sound philosophy. As I mentioned, under WSA, we have two premium brands that work under the time domain or the frequency domain strategies, and Signia is the latter. So it captures the full spectrum of sound in one snapshot. The approach is to filter. It provides extra processing power that's efficiently used to create greater conversational enhancement. So what do we mean by this? Well, let's talk about the traditional approaches, right? So in traditional approaches, what usually happens is you can hear from the speaker, the front speaker, very nicely. They can understand it, but hearing the talkers around, it isolates the environmental sounds, it cuts the patient off, and so they can't hear other talkers out of the side of that narrow focus if they have narrow or advanced beamforming. So with narrow directionality, we call it advanced beamforming. Traditionally, it's very effective. It focuses on the front and it actually increases speech understanding significantly, even above and beyond those who have normal hearing. So those people with hearing loss do better with that technology than normal hearing adults. But what happens is in this strategy with a narrow focus, You can hear the front speaker, but not so great the people around you in the back and to the sides. So it's not an effective strategy for those conversation environments, like a cocktail party kind of situation where the patient wants to hear multiple conversation partners. So either way, there's a limitation. Either manufacturers um, limit the processing because they, if you will, relax noise reduction and directionality and try and access speakers, but speech isn't clear due to background noise, or isolating because of advanced beamforming. And so these solutions have not worked in the past for, again, those dynamic kinds of situations. So in comes split processing. Split processing is actually um, uh, amazing technology that is unique for Signia, where the sound is now being processed in two independent processing tracks. So very efficiently adds and shows contrast between the speech from the front, helping the patient focus on the speech and the contrasted signal, and then separately processes the surrounding sounds, affecting speech processing, and keeps the patient immersed in that environment, but creates a situation where we're catering to both the selective and distributed attention, and of course the nature as nature intended, being immersed in that environment. Um, all of this is happening with NFMI, near field magnetic induction. For us, it's now in its fourth generation. We call it ear to ear. And the advantage of NFMI, of course, is for binaural synchronization of not just data, but really, really fast exchange of digital information about the sound that's being processed. So not just like changing programs and changing volume, but really communication between the two instruments as if they were working as one. So now you have, with ear-to-ear binaural communication, that is happening at a very high, fast rate. So industry-leading wideband, low latency communication between the hearing instruments, and both ears working as one, as I mentioned, very high resolution data instantly being exchanged between the instruments. So this is the multi-stream architecture that is now able to be um, designed with this ear-to-ear technology, NFMI technology. And now, because of this fast data exchange, we are able to track multiple conversation partners at once, even if they're in background noise. So again, it's shaping the background separately. It's processing the background separately because it's using split processing. But at the same time, it is tracking and enhancing, as I mentioned, multiple conversation partners. Well, this is all happening at 192,000 data points per second, adapting 1,000 times per second. And this is the real-time conversation enhancement technology in the Signia IX platform that is doing this. This really three stages where this is happening. So um, I'm not going to talk about the stages too much because this is about really kind of the signal processing that's happening in the background. But analyze, augment, and adapt are the stages where the instruments are identifying the particular environment. The instruments are looking at the number of conversation partners, proximity, signal to noise ratio, where speech is with noise and where is speech without noise, or noise without speech. All of this, along with augmentation, which is the created contrast between the speech and the background noise, is happening. And of course, at the last stage, in the adapt, everything gets fused together, multiple conversation partners, and the enhancement of their conversations is fused together to deliver a very clear sound to the patient with enhanced directionality with these multiple streams. Now, when we test this, again, this is all about signal processing and testing it to make sure that our R&D is matching our expectations. And so you can see here that Signia, which is on the very, very top, has been compared to our competitors. In fact, um, uh, all competitor devices in this study, when you measure their SNR improvement, and I won't go into the details. I have a visual here in just a moment to show you how this was captured. But when you look at all competitor devices, even those who have AI co-processors for noise management, you can see all competitor devices essentially tend to settle about 1 dB of each other in terms of SNR, but mainly because they rely on different versions of a single channel processing. Remember, with IX, not only you have the real-time conversation enhancements and multiple streams, but you also have split processing. So everybody continues to process everything in a single track. And Signia IX now really stands out because it's independently reducing noise without distorting speech, which remember we were talking about processing. Well, if you process speech in a separate track than noise, well, whatever you do to noise is not going to be affecting the speech. So that's unlike our competitors. We're using split processing, separating the speech from environmental sounds, and IX adapts in real time, hence the real-time conversation enhancement to multiple talkers. So capability of enhanced by this real-time conversation enhancement allows multiple streams to focus and adapt to dynamically to the conversation in real time, in background noise, even as people move. So it really empowers the patient, and that's why we're getting these superior results. Is you can see even with the competitors AI coprocessor, Signia is able to deliver an additional 3.2 dB SNR improvement in background noise. Now you may be asking, well, how is this study done? So we know that technical SNR improvements are provided by hearing aids and usually linked to better speech understanding. So that's true. Real world performance can be influenced by a number of factors. Individual differences, of course, can be influenced by hearing loss, auditory processing, as I mentioned, and attention. Mean that the same SNR change can impact listeners differently. So to accurately assess speech understanding performance, hearing aids have to be tested directly with human participants as well in realistic environments, not just in the lab. That's our belief. So to investigate this, we commissioned the University of Horsentrum that conducted an external human performance study for Signia with the best performing competitors from our technical study that I mentioned. And this was a device that was launched in 2024 with the AI coprocessor. So we wanted to make sure that in a human studies performance, the setup is effective and it demonstrates the directionality by narrowing the beam to cut out surrounding noise and pop up the SNR. But it's a common approach for flagship claims. While it's not wrong, it's also indicative of real life kind of or good sound quality. It's why we took a different approach. The two speakers that you're going to see here are the two red speakers were actually playing distracting speech. We added, so that was a conversation that was had with the two speakers going back and forth, and then there was distracting speech going in the back to the sides. Um, and we created an environment where the surround isn't just the sound isn't coming from the behind, it's coming from 360 degrees. So real conversations are dynamic, they move naturally, which is why we included that second speaker to make sure that there's a conversation to be had rather than the speech coming from the front. Um, and we developed the advanced methodologies just to really make sure that this capability of real-time conversation enhancement is realized and is visualized. So again, not just sticking to the average testing that a lot of times is done with the speech coming from the front, but looking at a conversation partner, and measuring the SNR benefit. And when you do that, you can see with IX, you're getting 24% improvement in speech understanding in noisy group conversations versus the best the competition has to offer, even those with AI co-processors. This is a massive, massive result. What does it mean? Well, it just demonstrates that real-time conversation enhancement with split processing and its ability to independently enhance multiple speakers in real time is superior to a single stream deep neural network type of solution where it's using AI but still not able to enhance speech for better speech understanding. So with real-time conversation enhancement, your patients don't have to worry about facing the speaker. That's the point of this whole thing. Um, they essentially can keep up with the conversation, simply follow the conversation, and actively participate without having to turn their head to try and understand what somebody was saying from the side. And this just shows you that 86% of the participants in that study um, preferred the IX better than their own hearing aids. Okay. We also wanted to, again, make sure that this is something that shows efficacy in real world kind of environments. University of Western Ontario is a leading university within the audiology and hearing research. Dr. Susan Scully is an internationally renowned researcher, published large number of scientific papers and still going strong. Um, and we provided the hearing aids and fitting software to the study to her and her staff. And so this is the setup. As you can see, we use the IX technology with M receivers, and they use real ear measurements with verification to NAL and L2. This paper was actually published in the American Journal of Audiology, so certainly a peer-reviewed scientific paper. Now, the setup was as such that you can see here real world environment was used in this study. In this case, it was a food court in a busy mall located very close to the university. And the participant and two testers were involved actually. So one male, one female were seated at a round table, surrounded by other tables, other people sitting, eating, talking, making sure that similar test conditions across participants were captured, scripted conversation between the testers to make sure that familiar topics like, food and travel and weather and stuff like that was, so the scripts to make sure that frequent turn taking was done, and they were to make sure that equal amount of speaking time was given to each speaker. And after each of the three conversations, the participants were then asked to make a number of ratings about their listening experience. Now, we've got some really interesting and strong results. And here you see some of the key takeaways really from the plot that you see. The participants had statistically significant preference for all aspects that were tested for this real-time conversation enhancement that was tested, and when it was on versus when it was off. So those were speech clarity, there were understanding conversation partners, feeling the conversation partner was more prominent, reduction of background noise, and the amount of effort that was needed to follow the conversation. So overall preference close to 2, which on a 7-point scale, like, this is quite the feat. So in fact, it's not shown here, but really a striking 80% of all the participants indicating an overall preference for this technology. And on every single scale, as I mentioned, they preferred this technology over it not being on. So this was the conclusions from the study, showing really in line with the results of previous lab studies that we showed, where the evaluation of the Signia IX technology with real-time conversation enhancement is really superior in terms of better speech understanding in adverse listening environments. And it's using this ultra-fast ear-to-ear, this is the near-field magnetic induction technology that I was talking about, And it uses that technology is used in all of these. So things like own voice processing, which we'll talk about in just a moment, cross with our unique solutions there, exceptional battery life because it's exceptionally um, efficient in power consumption, ear to ear technology is, and outperforming the competition. Um, the E2E wireless 4.0 ultra fast is always on, always communicating between the hearing instruments. That's why they can create a virtual 8 microphone network and create these beams, if you will, the multi-stream architecture that is developed. So always on latency of about 4 milliseconds and 2 times faster than any other Bluetooth Classic compatible device. And this is our latest BCT that is in the market right now. I mentioned on voice processing. It is now in its second generation on voice processing is. Um, and here you can see that, of course, one of the main things that people complain about when you fit hearing aids on them is their own voice. It sounds unnatural to them. And Signia is actually the only manufacturer that has a solution for the own voice issue. It's called on voice processing. And so in the second generation of on-voice processing, we're using split or independent processing tracks for on-voice processing. So one track is designed to process the patient's voice when they speak. The other track is processing the soundscape. And so whereas on-voice processed separately, and so it remains comfortable. There's no confusion about when the patient is talking or speaking loudly versus somebody else near the patient. And whereas on-voice surrounding the sounds are more pleasant or more stable. So if you have own voice processing, it's been configured to harness that split processing capability, as I mentioned, with the augmented experience platform. And now you have that in the IX platform as well. So really quality work and an excellent, excellent option for those who are concerned about on voice issues or they're complaining about unnaturalness of um, the patient voice. And in case you're wondering how this works, is measuring the arrival times of the patients speaking their voice from their mouth to each one of the microphone inlets. So very sensitive microphones, and they're able to capture the arrival times and each one of the inlets and create this technology named on voice processing. This is what I also want to mention about on voice processing. This is a clinical study now, uh, and it shows the difference between um, us and two of our leading competitors. Now, you can see that the instruments were fitted to NAL and L2, and satisfaction ratings were captured. What you're looking at on the graph is Signia versus two of our biggest competitors. And what you're looking at is the closed versus open conditions. So closed fitting versus open fitting using an ALNL2. And you're also seeing Signia at the bottom, and then the other two competitors going from left to right. Now, the closed conditions are indicated by triangle. And as you can see, and this is the, I think, important part of this, um, Signia closed is equal to the open fitting of competitor A and better than the open fitting of competitor B. And this is because of own voice processing. So that's pretty remarkable. Again, the closed condition for Signia because of own voice processing in terms of satisfaction is equal to the open of A and better than the open fitting of B. It shouldn't be that way, traditionally speaking, but on voice processing has really made that happen. So I definitely encourage you to run that strategy, that calibration. It's only a 15 to 20-second calibration, but it increases patient satisfaction by 80%. That's been documented already. So here you can see that on-voice processing creates a more stable listening experience. We find that when you run on voice processing, patients are more likely to engage in a conversation. Again, talking about preference, and it helps to overcome the negative things that we see happen with hearing loss every day. So I compare, um, you know, because uh, because always processing is such a powerful thing, I always do this at the first fit, and I make sure that the patient knows the difference between always processing when it's on versus when it's not on, because there's really no other manufacturer that has this technology. And as I said, it's a big one. It just, you give yourself an 80% success rate when you do that. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is also Bluetooth technology. We know that LE audio um, is going to come in the future, but we want to be ready for your patients now. So we know that LE audio enabled devices will ship annually by 2027, but new smartphones will support LE audio by then as well. Not right now, where we see a lot of buzz in the market in terms of um, LE audio and things like Aurocast, but really has not penetrated the market. Here's another slide where um, you can see that the penetration of any LE audio um, as the function of year at the bottom of the screen, and you can see right now, and billions is on the y-axis, so that you can see that penetration depends on different markets and regions, and there are alternatives that continue to be used, like MFI and Classic and ASHA protocols. So another issue, of course, is Aurocast that uses a version of LE audio. And again, um, we look at Aurocast source devices, and we look at the penetration of the market. And as you can see, the total Aurocast broadcast audio developments deployments from 2024 to 2030. And you can see that right now it's really absolutely minimal. So once these technologies penetrate the market, of course, we would be the first ones to bring this to you. Um, so I just wanted to kind of talk about wireless connectivity very quickly, because right now there's different, if you will, there are different kinds of platforms of Bluetooth out in the market, and it tends to be a little bit confusing, certainly for the patients, but also for ourselves, the clinicians. And so the reason for that is that there are these different kinds of Bluetooth protocols trying to accommodate different kinds of platforms in the phones, in the TV systems, in any kind of Bluetooth enabled device. You can see the use case for each one of these types of Bluetooth technology. And as you can see, it is, it matters which uh, Bluetooth signal or Bluetooth technology you go with, because you may have different needs than the person next to you with the same kind of hearing loss. Some people don't even use Bluetooth, and they don't want to use Bluetooth. But my point is that there's definitely a difference, and choosing the hearing aids and employing these technologies in the hearing aids is something that, as I mentioned earlier, is very important to us. But we also want to make sure that the technology that we have in the hearing aids actually adds something and is beneficial for the patient. And it's not just something that is in there, but they cannot use it anywhere. Um, so I, being that the Signia IX and the BCT IX that was just launched is enjoying a new Bluetooth codec. I wanted to, and this is so new Bluetooth codec and new processing of classic Bluetooth, because we want to make sure that no matter who walks through your door, whether they have an Android phone or an Apple phone, as long as they have a Bluetooth device, or they want to pair it to a iPad, or pair it to a laptop, as long as it has Bluetooth, they're able to do it. You don't have to worry about what kind of Bluetooth devices they have at home or carrying with them. So we created BCTIX with this in mind. It has a new Bluetooth codec technology. And what I'm about to show you is some comparisons between us and our biggest competitor that I mentioned earlier. But before I do that, I just want to set the stage on how the comparison was done. So this is a flat um, 50 audiogram. The acoustic coupling was power domes, and we used proprietary fittings for both devices, for the Signia device and for the competitor's device. Um, and we used experience level so that we can make sure we're kind of comparing apples to apples. And we used the universal program for both devices. So there was no additional programs, or there was no, like, if you will, fine tuning or any kind of verification. So there are two clips here, and I'm going to actually show you the spectrograms of these two. So what you see is on top is the competitor device, and this is the transfer of this information. Remember, we were talking about ear-to-ear technology, right? We were talking about transferring not just digital information, but also audio signals using ear-to-ear and FMI, near field magnetic induction. And so what you see on top is the competitor devices that are showing a speech signal that's being transferred from the right to the left ear using older Bluetooth technology. And you can see that it's a very unstable, if you will, stereo. This is a spectrograph. So very unstable stereo image. The spectral graph is showing the left and the right hearing aids, and you can see that they don't remain synchronized. So when it's going from right to the left, the signal, um, that there's distortion there. So the um, the lighter or the brighter the areas, the more speech information there. The darker areas show you that that speech information is either gone or has been processed differently. And so you can see that the transfer of information from the right side to the left side is something to be desired. It's not stable over time, and speech and noise background aren't stable. Now, if you look at the bottom with the Signia IX devices, you can see that with Signia IX, the processing of the left and the right signal is correctly synchronized. It looks identical. Even visually, you can see that there is no difference essentially between the right and the left instrument. Whereas for the competitor, you can see that there's absolutely a difference when this information is being exchanged from the right to the left ear. That's a big deal. That means less stable speech. That means the darker color, which has less energy, is not giving the patient, one side of the patient's brain anyway, not giving the same signal, a weaker signal than the other side. And so when this happens, of course, you have mismatches, you have distortion. And we talked about things like delay and distortion and processing that really do a number on patient satisfaction when it comes to the signal processing. Now, here's another one where we measured music. So the music was measured here, and we showed that not just with going speech from one side to the other, but also streaming music from one side to the other using regular music. So remember, the darker color is here, it means less energy, and the brighter the color, the stronger the signal. So if you look at these, you can see just again visually that because of the misclassification, the bass and the mid frequencies um, is rather unstable. So the fluctuation between the left and the right, this leads to a very unstable localization situation. And with Signia at the bottom, you can see again, the distribution of energy is in the bass and the mid frequencies remains stable. It's stable over time, and the sound impression is stable. So again, it matters. we're doing the same kind of fitting, right? But when you look at the spectrograph, when you look at the processing, if I was one patient and I tried these two hearing aids and I heard this myself, I would have a clear preference for the bottom one because I hear a more balanced, richer sound in both ears rather than just one. Okay, so um, we think, I think that there is distinct preferences that are satisfied by distinct sound philosophies. It's something that we observe somewhat actually anecdotally across our accounts, fitting both the brands, the Signia and the Widex brands. And it's something that we believe based on our research and development and the scientific knowledge. Something that's supported by industry research in other areas. So, for example, in terms of compression. And we know that people can be grouped by preference of sound. So the research that we're doing is testing 4 areas right now on this very same topic. For a company that maintains two premium brands with completely distinct sound philosophies and digital signal processing platforms, we've decided that this needed to be studied. And we asked ourselves, essentially these 4 key questions, and then set out to research them. And that's what we continue to do. And I want to show you some results there as well. Um, so we wanted to look at can people be grouped by preference of sound? People prefer different sounds for different reasons, and expressed hearing needs that differ between preference groups. So a decision tree can be built based on these learnings of preference, and that's what we set out to do. And we currently have multiple studies actually underway, 2 of which are recently completed with publication of the results expected in the coming months. And so I'm really excited for these to come out very soon. This is really first of its kind research in the industry. The goal was to examine the sound preference, all categories of users, new, experienced, young, old, and it requires a huge N number of participants for our industry. So involved developing a range of recordings, questionnaires, and protocols to examine sound preferences separate from other factors that might influence um, hearing aids and hearing aid acceptance. Because the analysis, the publication of the results is ongoing, I can't yet share the outcomes, unfortunately, but I can say this. We do see evidence that people have sound preferences, sometimes strong preferences. These um, um, preferences aren't based on just uh, the age or something like that, but really reasons for different people. Individuals have a hard time expressing these needs for sounds, but they can identify them and what they are when they hear it. They can tell us that there is a difference and they have a preference, one versus the other. So one thing to report, the other thing to actually hear and experience and report. And so this creates opportunities to assess sound preference earlier in the hearing journey and really be able to use this for a holistic approach for our patient care. So people prefer different sounds for different reasons. And we know that expressed hearing needs differ between preference groups. And last item that I'll put on this slide is that we now, a sound preference test is going to be built. We're trying to build sound preference tests based on our learnings on preference and what we've gathered there. We know that, we've talked about a few times now today, and where the hearing aid is rooted in deep personal preference, it creates a fundamental tension while audiology is striving measurable accuracy, of course, precision fitting, audibility, intelligibility. The end user's experience is shaped by individual perception, their emotional response, their personal taste. We need to account for diverse perceptual frameworks and emotional connections to sound. Moving beyond a purely kind of technical definition of quality, with sound preference, we're entering the science of preference psychology. So, psychological factors such as expectation bias, emotional connection, nostalgia, these exert a profound and often underestimated influence, I dare say, on our patients' perceived sound quality and their willingness to invest. So, um, it's uncharted territory for us in audiology. It's a new layer to explore, very exciting, and can't wait to have these research published so we can dig into them even further. In a clinical world, the goal of amplification, of course, starts with mission of audibility, but also we need to include attributes like clarity, naturalness, absence of harshness or distortion, and a sense of acoustic spaciousness, if you will, among many other aspects. So for us, it's about understanding, if you will, the differences and preferences on all these aspects. Um, what we're talking about here is kind of beyond the thresholds, higher order auditory process systems, like the ability to detect slight changes in spectral and temporal structures of a signal and impact on cognitive abilities such as working memory, cognition in general. So depending on what structures the individual relies on most, the sound that is, better matched to the system, be easiest to listen to and probably preferred best. So that's kind of the thought there. The current hearing care journey, personal sound preference is, of course, addressed during the acclimatization phase, where we see how patients adjust to their devices, make adjustments, or help facilitate success. Sometimes it's an easy process. Other times it takes takes longer, or sometimes it fails, honestly. So we did that is possible that the process might shift and shorter time for acclimatization that is a result. So for fewer dropouts in this journey, could start with a sound that is preferred, makes for a smoother and less steep acclimatization, because what the user heard was his natural preference, making preference part of the pre-fitting or the first fit. Could be the key if we could actually implement that, do something where during the pre-fitting or the first fitting, we're looking at preferences rather than down the line when we're in the acclimatization phase, where during the acclimatization, we're trying to shift this whole process. So shift it and make it a shorter time for acclimatization, so that we have fewer drops in the hearing care journey, as I mentioned. So would that leave more time for better hearing? Earlier success stories, less kind of fine tuning, acceptance, more time for other patients, more time for all the other things that are also needed, explaining, adjusting, supporting. Um, and so we believe that the wearers have different needs and also different sound preferences. That is the heart of what we were talking about today. And we want to make sure that we respect that from an audiological perspective. We already can give some guidance on patient profiles. Each brand has definite strengths, and they complement each other. Each brand comes with distinctive differences in portfolio, the features, if you will, the form factors. But we also know that there is more at play. In fact, much more. So sound preference is more complex and not as easy to predict or uncover with the tools and the understanding that we currently have today. So a new dialogue needs to be established and taken at the right time to ensure best first choice, right? To have them have that journey be as strong and as successful as possible. Very good. Well, I'm almost done here. I just want to leave you with a couple more slides. We are uniquely well positioned to study the impact of sound design on sound preference because we offer two very distinct sound designs. And I talked about the differences in signal processing. Um, Audiology and making people hear again is more about understanding preferences, priorities, and compromise, all with an open expert mind with an audiological expertise that you have. And at WSA, we're uniquely well positioned to do this. The impact of sound design and how sound preference brings you insights and tools that may improve the care you're able to provide for your patients. So this is a very exciting line of research for our industry, and we definitely look forward to bringing these results to you in the very, very near future. So please stay tuned. Um, with that, I just want to thank you all very, very much for joining me this last 2 hours to look at this exciting research and the direction that we're headed. And I sincerely appreciate your time today and hope to run into you again at another one of our trainings or maybe even in person if you're around the conferences. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I just have one question here down below. Let's see, does one patient profile or another tend to prefer the Widex or the Signia?
Um, so So I can't answer that with certainty because honestly, I don't have any data to share with you. This is part of the research that we're doing right now. We know that when we look at it, as I mentioned earlier, we do see preferences for one sound philosophy and signal processing from one brand to another, from one philosophy to another, from time-based domain versus frequency-based domain. So we know that that exists, but I don't want to give you bad information. I'll just ask you to kindly stay tuned, and we're going to give you that information very, very soon.
Okay, here's another one. It was my understanding that when using frequency shifting will require reasonable amount of time for the patient to adapt perceptually. So then how can patients be satisfied if frequency shifting is only used temporarily or once in a while and not enough to get used to it?
I think the question surrounds the feedback management system that we were talking about in under the Allure platform. Um, and so the perceptual difference of when that does actually happen is something that needs to be carefully examined. So there is no perceptual differences, but there is certainly efficiency in being able to use frequency shifting in those times and those bands where where feedback actually happens, and not apply it as a whole, where it may actually generate artifact rather than trying to serve the purpose of benefiting the patient. So I don't have an exact answer for you there, but I can tell you that there is parameters around which frequency shifting can be done without any kind of perceptual problems.
Okay, no other questions. And thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Uh,